Resurrection is the name of the brand new album by Operation Mindcrime, of course, Geoff Tate's band after the split of Queensryche, one that could be considered both fruitful and ridiculous, considering it dominated a couple of years of the 2010s, and we've actually gotten two bands that are much better than what we got with Dedicated to Chaos back in 2011. That being said, it's still a cautionary tale that's that of legend, and Geoff Tate makes me feel very, very happy to have the hair that I do. But at any rate, this is the second part of the trilogy of albums that was begun with The Key last year in 2015, and it was an okay album. It was definitely one that had some derivative nature to it. It seemed a little bit samey, a little bit like, new era, same old crap, whatever it is that you want to call it. But at the end of that album, we said that something big was happening, and of course, the real something big that was the near death of the main character. It was sort of left to this cliffhanger, and yikes. So where are we going to go from here? What does Resurrection have to offer? This 14-track affair, and basically, I'm not going to go deep into story. That's not really my purpose. The purpose is for you to sort of do that on your own, but let's talk about this a bit. First thing you're going to notice on Resurrection is the fact that we have some longer tracks on here. We have some 6 and 7 minute long cuts, which is actually promising right from the get-go, because if there's one thing I remember very well from The Key, was that whenever the composition was allowed to be expanded a little bit and they sort of gave you a little bit of story dump, it ended up working very, very well in some places, so that feels like it's going to be a potential strength. So you go through this and you start it off, and the very first 4 tracks... Here we go again. Now, I understand that the namesake of this band, Operation Mindcrime, used 2 tracks of sort of cinematic ideology in order to sort of get things started, but this is 4 tracks, with Resurrection being 1 minute and 40 seconds, When All Falls Away being 2:21, Moment in Time being 29 seconds. And we do not get a proper first track until Left for Dead at track number 5 at 4 minutes and 18 seconds. This is the first thing that resembles actual, music that's relevant to the story. It feels like the first 4 tracks are just H freaking waking up and looking around and realizing, well, fuck, I'm not dead. That's pretty cool, but I still got work to do because I'm the hero. Woo, okay, thanks. Did we really need 4 tracks in order to convey that idea? I think the reason why the namesake of the band, Operation Mindcrime, worked a lot better with just the 2 was because both of them were relevant, and the second one led right in to the 3rd track as opposed to this one, which feels very distant from it. Left for Dead almost feels like some sort of recollection of what was going down. Either that, or it's like we just went back to, him being, him laying there, and it feels like those 4 tracks are kind of pointless. It's really kind of bad, and that's not a very good start. And really, as a listener, going through 4 tracks of setup for a track like Left for Dead just feels very tedious. It was not a very good selection. This might have been something that may have been better off if, 1 or 2 of these tracks were left as a cliffhanger or perhaps a little setup piece at the end of the Key, but instead we get them here, and it really starts this album off on a negative foot. Now, what about the music itself once we get to track 5 to track 14, where there's basically no setup pieces after this whatsoever? Everything else is straight up tunes, 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 minute long cuts setting up story, and really the whole idea is that H is going and wants to set up and, launch the new reality, the new world, the new whatever. This is kind of par for the course for a Geoff Tate storyline. I'm really hoping, as far as that's concerned, that part 3 really is able to ramp things up a little bit, because this kind of got a little bit tiresome and very tedious. Now, is the story the real reason for that? No, it's actually some of the combinations of the music and the lyricism, just sort of the overall scope. Some of these ideas feel a little tired. This feels a lot like the middle portion of a trilogy of films that you would see, where sometimes you have a lot going down, but a lot of it just feels like, the bridge. It's the bridge that links things together, but you don't recognize that until you have the whole thing in front of you. Because overall, some of these compositions feel a little bit sparkless. They feel like they have a lot of, moving character to them, but not a lot of heart behind them. They were written sort of with this, idea in mind of, just setting things up for whatever the finale is meant to be. Not to mention, Geoff's voice is definitely not booming the way that it used to, and that's not really a complaint, considering age will tend to do that. However, what it does actually set up is the fact that on this album, Tate is moving from his, higher registers, which, like I just mentioned, have been a little bit more muted in past years, but also sinks down to this almost David Bowie-esque, croon, which is a little awkward to say the least. Not because Dave has just died, but because it just doesn't really, it sounds creepy. It really sounds creepier as opposed to sounding like it's really, impactful, I guess, for this piece. It doesn't have that same register, and the way in which he's trying to waver the voice a little bit and taper it off. I never really thought that I would ever say that Geoff Tate's vocals were one of the main problems of an album, but it's definitely one of the cases here. Taking on the world, rather, is another interesting case, considering he's enlisted the help of Ripper Owens and Blaze Bayley, two individuals that he's going to be going on tour with later on this year. Isn't that convenient? It's almost like a glorified advertisement. No, not really. They probably... the tour was set up by the song, I'm sure. But this is one that's interesting, too, because you can barely differentiate between the three. They do have similar vocal styles, but also some of the production on this is a little bit muddied down. It almost feels a little rushed. You can't really tell very much who's to say is what is who. What? That was weird. But this is just... I'm really, really shocked at this album, which has a ton of potential, which has a lot of the things that I would find favorable about a disc of this variety, just feels very flat. It does not come off with a lot of pizzazz and panache. It doesn't have a lot of that spark that really drives an album of this variety, of this distinction. That's why Operation Mindcrime 2 didn't exactly work out, not to mention the myriad of problems that were going on behind the scenes within Queensryche. It was essentially Geoff Tate presents Operation Mindcrime 2 with a bunch of people that we don't know, that you don't really hear from again. But this is an album that shouldn't have had that same distinction. It shouldn't feel like it has that same amount of just sort of blasé. Bleh. That's the best way I could put it, is blasé. Bleh. Some of the solos on these tracks are okay. Listening to tracks such as The Smear Campaign, either that or The Fight, they're alright. It's just that as a whole, it functions very limitedly. It does not have a good overall body and structure, and it doesn't feel like it has a lot to really offer, even to its own story. I hope that this is one of those albums, quite frankly, because I did enjoy The Key. But I hope that Resurrection is one of those albums that really, once you hear the third part of the trilogy, the second part really opens itself up. Like, this is one that's open up to that idea of being a grower, but only after the trilogy is complete. The question is, this album is really so kind of that I wonder how many people are going to be dedicated to Chaos enough to actually want to check out the third part of this trilogy. Not very good at all, this was. Not at all. 62 out of 100. Like I said, a lot of great ideas present here, but there's a lot of just soulless, very lifeless moments to this disc. It didn't feel like it had a lot of range of motion. It was it just felt very lost, and I really think that it was lost from the start with the decision to have those 4 tracks worth of sort of build up to your very first actual in-story song. I want to know what you guys think about Resurrection. Am I off base with this? I'm sure some of you will feel that I am. Please let me know why you think that way in the comments below. For those of you who don't feel that I'm off base, what didn't you like about this disc? What did you think that it did well? I'm coverkillernation, and I'm still looking forward to the third part of this trilogy because I think that, or I'm hoping at least, that it'll bring everything together. But for right now, oh man, not good. Not good at all. I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.